2006 Dodge Viper SRT-10 Coupe, and you can only get the Coupe in the 2006 model year if you wanted a third-gen Coupe. And I gotta say, this thing looks the business, especially in this GTS blue color with the silver stripes. I love it. We have this replica ACR wing. I think the newer ACR actually has a width of 1,776 millimeters. I wonder why. Actually very fitting, because this is actually July 4th weekend as I am reviewing this car. And this is my first Viper that I'm going to be reviewing on the channel. I am quite excited, and we're powered by an 8.3 liter naturally aspirated V10 that makes 510 horsepower, 535 pound-feet of torque with a 6,000 RPM redline. You don't normally see the torque figure being higher than the horsepower figure, at least not on a sports car. That's made it to a Tremec 6-speed manual. We have a Hydrolock speed sensing LSD, which is essentially a speed sensing hydraulic clutch LSD. So it waits for a rear wheel speed difference, and then it hydraulically compresses the clutches to help lock the rear axle. We weigh 3,450 pounds with a 50-50 weight distribution. Actually, it's 49.4 in the front and 50.6 in the rear with a 99-inch wheelbase, which is actually quite surprising because with such a massive engine in the front, you'd expect it to be far more front biased, but it's actually a true front midship. The entire engine is behind that front axle. Keep in mind that this is around 50 to 60 pounds heavier than the Roadster because the Viper from the ground up was designed to be a Roadster, so adding the Coupe adds weight to it, whereas normally you see the inverse. But keep in mind, with the Coupe, we get 30% increased torsional rigidity. We have double wishbone both front and rear, hydraulic steering, Brembo brakes, and ABS coming standard, but no traction, no stability. MSRP for these was $82,000. Currently on the market today, around 80 to 95K. The owner, Leon, is actually putting this up for sale right now. He's owned it for a year, and it's been an experience, but it's time to move on. You can find links to that listing or his contact info down below. Now, this Gen 3 Viper is also the first generation to have the SRT-10 badge, and SRT stands for Street and Racing Technology. It's the high-performance division of Stellantis, and if you compare it to the second gen, the engine displacement and power both increase. Keep in mind that first and second gen is more of like a 1.5 gen. It's essentially the first gen with a hardtop. But that was 8 liters, and this is now the 8.3 liters. But get this, the weight of the overall vehicle decreased for Gen 3, while chassis rigidity improved. That's pretty awesome. Now the engine here, going back to the power figures, it's quite interesting that you have more torque than horsepower. Now keep in mind, this is largely a truck-derived engine. It's pushrod. We have 2 valves per cylinder, 90 degrees, and a red line of only 6,000. Normally when you think of a supercar with a V10, it's going to be much more high revving, lower displacement, right? Now, the engine actually originated for Chrysler's truck V10 architecture, and because Chrysler owned Lamborghini at the time, Lamborghini actually helped adapt the concept for the Viper, mainly by converting it from a heavy iron block to a lighter aluminum engine, and assisting with some cooling and casting details. But this is definitely no Lamborghini engine. Very, very light influence and light consulting from Lamborghini. It was more engineering support. It was not authorship. The final product is very much pure Dodge. It's huge, it's simple, it's low revving, and it has a very unique character that is nothing like an exotic Italian V10. I'd argue that the engine still is exotic, but not because of the high revving like European counterparts, but because it's just massive. That's what makes it exotic. The interior on these definitely feels the price, because this car was essentially competing with things like the Ferrari 360 when it came out, and this was like half the price. And to compete with that, you got to save money somewhere. So the interior here is definitely not, it's not going to impress anyone. You have, you know, the head unit here straight out of some other Chrysler vehicles. Very simple HVAC. I like the gauges here. They feel pretty sporty, pretty special. Now, one thing you got to keep in mind, this rocker panel with the side exit exhaust, this can get very hot. They even have a warning label right here. So wear pants when you can, and be careful. Try not to touch this, which is going to be hard when we get out. Manual transmission, really nicely placed close to the steering wheel, nice and high as well. Sometimes older cars have it really far low, but it falls to hand really easily. But funny enough, this parking brake is really far off to the right. I'm feeling like I'm reaching quite a ways over. Super wide transmission tunnel here, and it's a pretty big interior overall. Now, the actual pedals move, and there's a switch here where you can electronically control that, as you can see. That's a pretty neat touch. The steering wheel, therefore, does not need to telescope because you can always push the pedals away. I have these all the way set back, and then your seat, of course, slides. So a different way to adjust things, which I appreciate. I'm a taller driver, 6'1", and I got these clown shoes, size 13 feet, so that'll at least help us get comfortable here with our heel toe and such. It does get toasty in the cabin, but luckily it's a cooler day. Clutch engagement very high. That V10 rumble, this is very American. Wow, all right. Wow, first impressions, this is brutish. This is loud, this is involved, this is heavy with the weightings. All the control weights here, they require so much effort. The stick shift as an example, not delicate at all. The steering, hydraulic, getting feedback, not much dynamic loading in the corners at all. And not terribly heavy, but a little bit on the heavier side, which matches other things. Tons of travel to the throttle, clutch pedal, incredibly long throw, engagement quite high. Can feel the weight as you get into these corners. A little bit of slop to the steering wheel as well. Little double clutch there in a second. Nice immediate throttle response. And you don't have to rev this thing out all the way to red light because it has so much torque. Gobs and gobs of torque. Another double clutch there in a second. You can see that my steering wheel is chattering away. Some of that is signal, some of that is noise though over the bumps. You can feel it doesn't have the most rigid chassis, even though this is improved over the first and second gen and over the Roadster. Yeah, over that big bump, we're getting multiple up and downs. It is definitely underdamped. It feels all of its weight. It feels 34, 50 pounds. It's not hiding that at all. Let me give you a pull. The noise, the rattles, the intensity in the cabin. Wow. You know, it actually changes direction quite well because it's front midship. It's like a, as ridiculous as this sounds, it's like a brutish, imprecise, Americanized version of an S2000. You got the double wishbone in all four corners, front midship. Good fundamentals here. Yeah, she can boogie. She can boogie. Now, in terms of how old the car feels, it's 20 years old now, and I think the chassis rigidity and the noise coming through the steering over these bumps, it has pretty good feedback of road texture, but there's still a lot of noise. And also the suspension, it's so soft, it has a little bit of that crashy nature to it. That's where you're feeling the age. Oh, tons of grip. These R888s. Yeah, so much grip. There's no playfulness here, and I don't want to find out. You faffo with this car. No traction, no stability. 500 plus horsepower, 500 plus pound-feet of torque to the rear. Now, when you get on the brakes, unlike the throttle and the clutch, which have these really long throws, the brake pedal has a really short throw, actually. and it's quite firm, quite immediate. It actually feels much more modern than the rest of the inputs. Steering ratio slower, transmission throws longer. Brake pedal, not much travel, a lot of solidity, a little bit of, you know, sag at the very top. It still feels really good. And you definitely want good brakes in a car like this, where things can get sketchy real quick. You know, walking up to this car today, I was so excited, but also somewhat intimidated, because you hear these cars just want to kill you. And driving into the canyons right now at 6/10, not an issue. There's like right there, there's times when you get just a little bit of the hint of rotation at the rear, not actually getting any sort of counter shift. You can just start feeling the LSD working, that it's trying to help you rotate, and you know that if you pushed it harder, it'd want to play. But not today, not with these tires, not on this road. But it's not as intimidating as I was expecting to drive. Now keep in mind, because this is so high, and this is also high, when you go from third to fourth, you may actually accidentally go into second. The owner was telling me he's actually almost money shifted, right? He's accidentally gone from third to second rather than fourth. So you got to be mindful of the ergonomics here. Oh, I projected that going to third. You really got to put a lot of effort into this. Long throws, really notchy, but not like precise notchy. There's like a high effort and a little bit of, you know, not too much slop, but it has this almost agricultural feel to it. One more pull. Absolutely insane. So much power, so much torque. Keeps rejecting my downshift from fourth to third. You're gonna have to double clutch that instead. So there were two cars I idolized as a kid. It was the first and second gen Viper as number one, and it was the Lamborghini Diablo as number two. And I drew so many of those as a kid. I was obsessed with them. I had the model cars from Maisto at Costco. You know, I loved these cars. And this is not a Gen 1, Gen 2, this is a Gen 3, but still, such a special experience finally driving a Dodge Viper. Big shout out to the owner, Leon, for letting me review his Viper. And this car, I'll put it this way, it grows hair on your chest, right? You drive this car, it is brutish, it is American, it is testosterone filled. And when you compare it to something like the C6 Z06, I mean, that thing was lighter. It had a 7-liter LS7. It was much more of a modern performance benchmark, whereas this wasn't as light. It wasn't as quick in most acceleration tests. It wasn't as easy to live with. It's much more of a blunt instrument. It's maybe not as sophisticated, but it gives you a lot of confidence behind the wheel, and it has this character and this roughness and this tremors and driveline shuffle and the gearbox noises and all this heat that's coming through. Don't drive this on a hot day over 80 degrees is what the owner tells me. There's a lot of physicality here. It feels like much more of an experience driving this, because sometimes the flawed cars are the ones that we actually enjoy more. This is not supposed to be the best all-around sports car. It's supposed to be more emotional, more theatrical, more intimidating, and less refined. And I think for that, this definitely delivers all the goodness, all the experience, and what a pleasure, what a treat. When you zoom out and look at the Dodge Viper in the context of overall American culture, it's easy to just dismiss it as bigger is better, which is partially true, but there's actually more to it that I find quite fascinating, because on one hand, yes, American culture is very much bigger is better. You don't need to have as much engineering sophistication. Let's just throw more size at it. And that is somewhat the Viper approach, but it would be unfair to leave it just there. I think it is crude, but it is deliberately crude. I mean, in the 2000s when this car came out, Porsche and Nissan, they already had built-in safety nets. This Dodge Viper is very much no safety nets, and it's a car that can kill you if you don't know what you're doing. It's almost like pursuing refinement for this car was dishonest, and they wanted to be as unfiltered and as raw and as crude as possible. And the V10, some would argue, is there to be big just for bigness sake. But the other side is that, well, having this naturally aspirated pushrod motor gives you this more linear and predictable and readable power with no turbo lag that is muddying that immediate connection. So while the Viper does lose out on some of that delicious fine-tuned calibration that you see in more European and Japanese sports cars, you still have this authenticity and rawness that come out as virtues in and of themselves, which are aligned with the larger American cultural narrative. And what a pleasure, what a treat. If you have a first or second gen Viper, please reach out. Would love to review it. JubbalOnCars.com. Same thing with the Lamborghini Diablo. Those two are very high on my list, but this was a lot of fun. If you want to buy this exact example, visit the link down below. Much love, my friends, and I'll see you all in that next one. All right, now let's see if I can get out of this thing without burning myself. All right, that wasn't so bad. There you go, Dodge Viper.